Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a massive power outage. I mean, not just a flickering light, but a complete widespread blackout covering like whole countries. What would that really feel like, you know? What would it truly mean? Today, we're diving into something pretty fascinating and honestly, at times, genuinely unsettling. It's a deep dive. Our sources present this unique account of a major blackout that reportedly occurred in Europe, and also a deep analysis of how that kind of information is perceived, how it's understood.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here isn't just the event itself, though that's obviously huge. It's how the human mind interprets something like that, such a profound disruption. And maybe even more so, it's about how we can approach information that comes from these very unconventional pathways, almost mysterious ones, you could say. We'll definitely explore this specific instance, but we also need to think about the broader implications, right? How we receive and process knowledge, especially when it kind of challenges our usual ways of thinking.
Right. So our mission for you today is pretty clear. We're going to dissect the perceived details of this reported event. We want to understand its claimed causes, its consequences, and then this is crucial step back and critically examine the very nature of this kind of investigative information. It's quite a journey into the unexpected we've got lined up. Now, you shared some.
It absolutely is. It really paints a picture. And what's particularly striking is the explanation given for why it happened. According to the source material, it wasn't a failure of the grid in the way we normally think about it. The information suggests electricity was still available, like everywhere, but it was just disconnected. The imagery used is powerful.
Yeah.
A vision of a very large switch, sort of like a big two-pronged fork being pulled down by what was described as a black hand.
A black hand, okay.
Yeah, and this black hand was apparently waiting for a command to act, which suggests, a deliberate, pre-planned disconnection. So on one level, the physical act was just someone pulling a switch.
Okay, but the esoteric side, the sort of metaphysical motivations described, they go way deeper, right?
Yeah.
The source talks about subtle ideas, projects, attempts behind it all. One key idea mentioned was promoting the widespread adoption of survival kits. That was actually presented as a desired outcome.
Right, a specific goal they apparently wanted.
And another primary intention, according to the source, was to create low emotions in people: panic, fear, despair, that kind of thing. This was explicitly linked back to reminding people of a past event in 2020, the suggestion being a goal to keep humanity sort of electrocuted by low frequencies.
And when the source says low frequencies, it's referring to those negative emotional states, right? The energetic states that just drain people, stop them relaxing or taking positive action.
Exactly. And the blackout itself was seen as a necessary moment to implement another plan, something connected to a hidden zone.
And what about governments? Were they in on this, according to the source?
Well, the perception was that the top-level officials didn't have conscious, explicit knowledge, but certain individuals within governments were subtly informed, or, as the source puts it, energetically given the information.
Ah, okay. So more of a subtle nudge.
Yeah, exactly. To make sure the blackout happened according to the plan. It suggests a more subtle, almost energetic kind of influence, not direct political orders.
Got it. And the impact on the collective consciousness.
Perceived as profound, these low frequencies we mentioned, greatly amplified, affecting something like 76% of the population in the blackout zone.
76%. Wow.
Yeah. People reportedly felt enormous despair, a deep sense of unpreparedness, feeling naked, without resources or knowledge. Just profound fear about it lasting longer, insecurity about basics like food. It really highlights how humanity was seen as completely unprepared to exist disconnected, especially from social media and the internet. That's a pretty thought-provoking detail, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It really makes you think about our modern dependencies, doesn't it? And geopolitically. Initially, no direct link was perceived, but then a connection to America emerged, specifically a hidden zone on American territory.
Okay.
And looking ahead, potential future consequences. As of early May 2025, the observation suggested a process of co-creation for another blackout, maybe even a larger one, had already started.
Co-creation. So the idea that our collective thoughts and fears actually help bring these things about.
It's exactly that. Especially fear and panic amplified by media. The source suggests the entities behind the first one intended a repeat, but bigger, relying on humanity's fear-driven participation, essentially.
And drilling down into those potential outcomes, the survival kits were expected to become much more common. And these kits, according to the source, would then be energetically charged.
Charged? How so?
Charged with information designed to constantly remind people of those low frequencies, creating ongoing unease, mental confusion, leading to a false sense of security. While other smaller blackouts might happen, the bigger ones, they depend entirely on this collective co-creation. The source is emphatic. It depends very much on us. Okay, now here's where the source material takes a really dramatic turn. It gets into what it perceives as the true, highly esoteric forces behind all this. And it's important to remember, as we'll discuss later, information from just one session like this carries a lot of what the source itself calls contamination. But let's just unpack these claims as they're presented. That man seen pulling the switch, the black hand guy, described as a big, fearful man, worked in electricity, forced into it, threatened with his life.
Okay, forced. And who was threatening him?
The source says his immediate threateners were perceived as two clones, described like marionettes with wires from above, like they were brought here just for that.
Clones. Wow. Okay, and behind them?
Behind them, the source describes what it calls reptilians and draconians.
Ah, okay. Entities you often hear about in this kind of lore, ancient, non-human influences.
Right, and they supposedly operate under an archon, which in some belief systems is like a powerful, controlling spiritual entity. And behind the archon, a large black energy cumulus, described as this powerful, formless energy mass. Very powerful.
Needs feeding, right?
Exactly. It needs to be fed by the energy of low vibrations that despair and fear. This energy, it claims, is needed for a bigger project. Depicted as the entire planet in darkness, Earth opening up, all humanity falling into a dark hole. I mean, it's quite the hierarchy of malevolent forces being described.
That is. Yeah, quite the cosmic drama playing out there. Wow. And speaking of these forces, let's go back to those survival kits for a second. What's actually in them, according to the source?
Pretty basic stuff, actually, like a school backpack. Notebooks, pencils, a ruler, water bottles, basic lights, candles, batteries, lamps, and non-perishable processed foods. Canned goods, dried sausages, that sort of thing.
Okay, standard survival fare.
Yeah.
But the hidden contamination part,
Right.
that's the twist, right?
That's the key twist, yeah. These items, especially the processed foods and bottled water, are claimed to be energetically charged to contaminate your body and destroy inner stability, making you feel like a castle of sand that slowly crumbles.
Huh. So creating a false sense of external security while actually weakening you internally.
That's exactly how it's described.
Interesting. Now, what about the actual energy grid, the infrastructure itself?
Yeah.
Did the source see vulnerabilities there?
Surprisingly, no. It suggests there are no inherent vulnerabilities if there was genuine political will to help people. It claims vast amounts of solar, wind, even sea energy could power Spain for weeks and months, including public transport.
But it's not used.
It's not applied, the source says, because it's not advantageous to certain interests, and there's apparently no real interest in storing it. The energy was there, but it was stopped by that black hand.
Right. Stopped deliberately.
Okay.
Then there's this Green Corridor project mentioned. Energy from Azerbaijan through the Black Sea, Romania, Hungary, to Europe.
Yeah. And despite the name green, the perceived color, energetically speaking, was red mixed with brown, a dirty color, suggesting something maybe not so vital or clean. It's also apparently not fully active or connected across all its parts yet.
And the hidden intention behind that, as perceived?
Total control of energy. The green name is seen as misleading. Countries that couple to this network will suffer for it, and the more countries join, the greater the possibility of large blackouts.
So connecting to it actually increases the risk.
According to this perception, yes. And public opinion in Romania, where it would pass through, was seen as divided. Some disagree, some empathetic, some just indifferent.
And here's the real ironic twist. You mentioned co-creation.
Exactly. The recent blackout event actually encouraged public desire for this very corridor, leading to what the source calls a co-creation with the very plan designed to bring more blackouts.
Wow. That's quite a loop. Okay. So we've covered the event, the really bizarre explanations behind it, these big energy projects. It's a lot to take in, but all of this, as we've noted, comes from this very specific, unconventional source, investigative hypnosis. So given how extraordinary these claims are, how do we even begin to evaluate the truth of any of this?
That really is the crucial question, isn't it? And it brings us right to the nature of information gathered this way. The caveat from the source itself is pretty profound. Information from a single hypnosis session is considered very contaminated. It has an extremely high percentage of pollution, is the term used.
Right. It's likened to trying to communicate underwater. The sound just gets totally distorted.
Exactly. The source explained information travels through, like, many dimensions and different consciousnesses, which can distort it voluntarily or involuntarily. Plus, the person in the session, their own mind, experiences, beliefs, even subliminal stuff, interprets the info, distorting it even further. What's staggering is the claim that only a tiny percentage, maybe 2 to 3% from one session is reliable. The rest is considered garbage.
2 to 3%.
Yeah.
That's almost nothing. So it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack of static, really. It completely reframes how you'd approach these details we just discussed.
Absolutely. So the purpose of these single sessions from this perspective isn't about memorizing data or taking it as literal instruction. It acts more as a vehicle of movement, maybe, to help address a client's specific problem or situation.
Okay. So how is reliable information obtained according to this method, if single sessions are so contaminated?
Well, true investigation using this method is described as a long, difficult, tiring process. It requires teams and thousands of sessions.
Thousands.
Thousands! Reliable information is only the stuff that shows up as equal to all or almost all of those thousands of sessions, like consistent descriptions of certain extraterrestrial beings across many sessions, or everyone consistently reporting Mars as red. Those kinds of basics.
Okay, so looking for the recurring patterns across a huge data set.
Exactly. The analogy given is like seeking news from official controlled sources, even knowing they might manipulate things at high levels rather than some random blog, because the official sources offer a kind of baseline guarantee of certainty even with their flaws.
Makes sense. And there's also the point about consent and manipulation, right?
Yeah. While interference with one being might open a communication channel, trying to investigate entities with no connection to the person in the session often just hits a wall, or you get manipulated information from other entities just exploiting the situation.
Right, dumping in on the connection.
Yeah.
And the feasibility of investigating specific topics.
Also limited. Restricted spaces or really specific themes, like the example given of pedophilia allegations in the Catholic Church, are seen as more feasible for getting presumably reliable info. But even that still requires many, many sessions.
But broad, generic topics, like black holes.
Almost impossible to investigate reliably this way, just the sheer volume of sessions and filtering needed.
It's too much. Generic topics have to be broken down, pieced together slowly.
Okay. So what does this all mean for us listening to this? It means we engage with information like the Blackout story, not as, literal truth to memorize, but maybe as a fascinating glimpse into perceived realities. And more importantly, perhaps, as a jumping off point for critical thinking. Thinking about how we gather and interpret knowledge ourselves, especially when it comes from these non-traditional places. Right. So given all these layers, the perceived event, the nature of the perception itself, how can we, as individuals, as a collective, navigate this kind of potentially unsettling information and its real-world implications? The source suggests many people are caught in a kind of vortex of negative thoughts, fears, despair, insecurity.
Yeah, there's this deep sense described of not belonging, almost like a child without a nurturing mother figure, which leads people to seek external mothers everywhere, and that act gives power away to events, to external forces. The collective consciousness, particularly in those affected regions after the blackout, was perceived almost like a funeral, a wailing of despair, feeling just defeated after other disasters like floods and then this. It's a powerful image of mass emotional impact.
It really is. So how do we break that cycle? How do we strengthen consciousness according to this source? What's the advice?
Well, for individual action, the guidance is pretty clear. Don't connect to these events. Don't give them power. Don't be overwhelmed.
Right.
The advice is essentially to detach, to connect with your interior self, your inner core.
Okay, detach and go inward. And collectively?
Collectively, the call is to open hearts to others. To connect, create a bond. The source explicitly says, where there are two, power grows. Not out of obligation, but from a place of shared well-being. The idea is to be a model for others.
And the power of positive energy, was that mentioned?
Yes, definitely highlighted. Attempts described within the source to send love, pure awareness, warm embraces into the global consciousness apparently had an impact. Subtle at first, like a leaf, was the description. Then more direct, like a ball with power. And this caused people to shift their attention to begin to cleanse layers of old, heavy beliefs. It's an interesting take on collective healing for sure.
And your role, the listener's role in the future, is really emphasized, isn't it?
Hugely. The source explicitly states that humanity together has the capacity to elevate our consciences and avoid very many of the events that are happening, including future blackouts like this one. The next 3 months from the time of the source recording were seen as crucial determining whether another blackout happens, a 50-50 chance apparently, based on how humanity reacts and cleanses these past events from the collective consciousness.
So a real message about responsibility there. When you hear this information, don't give power to these sessions by taking them as 100% real. Listen, analyze, but from a neutral point of view, avoid panic.
Exactly. And positive affirmations can apparently help, especially for people who have, say, at least 35–45% self-awareness, meaning understanding themselves as individuals who are connected to but still distinct from the collective. This self-awareness, the source suggests, helps elevate consciousness on all levels: individual, family, city, country, even global.
Wow. What a journey into the unexpected, truly. We've navigated this perceived blackout, explored its very esoteric roots, and maybe most importantly, critically examined the information itself. It definitely leaves you with a lot to think about, doesn't it?
It really does. This deep dive, I think, shows us that knowledge isn't always straightforward, not black and white. It often comes layered with interpretation, and it really calls for discernment from us. The aha moment here isn't just in what was perceived in the session, but maybe more in the power of asking ourselves, how do I know this? And what does this truly mean for me? It's about building that internal resilience to information, maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. You have the power to engage with information consciously, to choose not to be overwhelmed by fear, and maybe even to contribute to a collective shift. That feels like a truly profound takeaway.
So maybe a final thought to consider. If information, even from these really unconventional sources, can be both highly contaminated and potentially a vehicle for deeper understanding, or even a call to action, what responsibility do you have in discerning what truly serves your own awareness? And how does your personal interpretation, your reaction, contribute to the larger collective reality we all share?